Good news you can use with that Mahone, yeah. She got the good news you can use. Good news you can use for your life. So listen up, everybody. Listen up, everybody. She got the good news you can use. Good news you can use for your life. If you wanna get the info that'll help you throughout your life, yeah.
Hello again, and welcome to a special edition of the Boomer Beats with your host, Beverly Mahone. In these series of segments, we are taking a trip down memory lane to talk about days gone by and the woulda, shoulda, coulda of our lives. And joining me on this particular episode is my good friend, Mitch Mitchell, out of Syracuse, New York. Hey, Mitch, how are you?
Doing good today.
Good. Okay, well, it's doing well today, not doing good today, but okay.
I was born in the South. It's doing good.
All right. Just a little humor there. All right. So, Mitch, why don't you share with us, like your upbringing and how you got to where you are today?
Wow, that's scary. Well, I was a military kid. So I was born on an Air Force base. I mainly lived on Air Force bases until I was 16. The only time I didn't was when I lived in the ghetto when my dad went to Vietnam. So it was a strange life. And back then, entire school was black except for one Mexican kid. But not all the teachers were. So that was interesting. And so I leave there, and then I moved to Central New York at a certain point where 3,800 kids at the school, and only about 50 were black. So that's just two different kinds of things. And then where I went to college, it wasn't a lot of blacks then. There's a lot more now. But it was just one of those kind of things where I at least had a work ethic. So, I was always just trying to find that career, which didn't turn out to be the career I wanted it to be, but it still ended up being a career. And eventually I was able to become an independent consultant in healthcare and leadership. And that's where I kind of am right now.
Let me ask you a question. So you grew up as a military kid. How different do you think your life would have been had you not been in some way associated with the military? Do you think that your path would have been different? Do you think, hindsight's always 20/20, of course, but how different do you think it would have been?
I think it would have been drastically different. I mean, other than that year in Kansas City when, I was living in the ghetto, and it really was a ghetto, military life, it's a totally different thing. It's a lot more regimented. It's truthfully a lot more mixed. So even though you hear that there's racism, which most of the time it's not the families, it's individuals who, the young guys who come in who may have some of that. You don't have a lot of that with the families because it's fairly mixed. Black, white, Asian, I'll say Indian, but Indian is Asian, but you know what I mean? It's really more mixed. And sometimes you go to certain grades off the base, and then sometimes you don't. So it was a different life. It's like we all understood each other. So I'm sure you've heard of the stories where a kid moves into a new town and now he has trouble, getting along with people because they're not used to the new kid. Well, when you live on military bases, you never have that as an issue because everybody's a new kid. But when I moved here, like I said, first it was a large school. I mean, the school that I had gone to before was about 300 kids. So coming from that kind of school to 3,800 was scary. Coming to a place where it wasn't as mixed was somewhat scary. But I was dismissed a lot. The only friends I made were other people who had moved there at around the same time. So it's a totally different life. I think that everyone gets to know everybody else, maybe not as much in a big city, but even there, they get to know everybody in their neighborhood. I never really had that kind of life. So I think it's a lot different.
So in hindsight, let me ask you this, because you did travel a lot as a young child. Did the moving around a lot as a young person kind of deter you from wanting to move around as an adult? And the reason I ask that is because I know you've been in New York for like ever. And I don't know if you've ever lived anywhere else other than New York, but is that by choice or is it because the opportunities were just so great there?
Once my dad retired, because this is where we retired to, um, truthfully, I always thought I was going to probably move around because that had been my life. And in one respect, I have, but I've always lived here in this area. I lived in 9 different apartments before I moved into this house. So, that's interesting. And that's not even counting the 4 years I went to college, which was in Oswego, New York. It's about 35 miles north. So if I count that, that's 10 places I lived in, well, I guess we could say almost 20 years. But I've been in this house for 21.
Okay, so basically you thought you'd be moving, but you didn't. So all right now, if you knew then what you know now, what things would you have done differently?
I'm going to go to something because we haven't talked about this, but this is one of those things if I had known better, I would have done this, which is to start putting away small bits of money out of every paycheck, at least to start with, because it's amazing how much money you could actually have, by the time, I'm getting close to 65, unfortunately, but that's just how that goes. I guess it's better than an alternative. But you have found that there's people who have ended up putting away $1 million or more by starting with little bits early on and then building it up, as time goes on. And if you invest it somewhere, overall, the market, favors the investor. So that would have been a big thing. I knew nothing about that at the time, knew nothing about budgeting. That wasn't a life that we really knew back then. You didn't come from that kind of family. So that would have been a big thing. Another thing probably would have been, I'm an only child. So I spent tons of time, even though I moved around a lot, I spent a lot of time totally by myself. Outside of sports, I was by myself. I read a lot. Early on, I watched a lot of TV. Then I got into music. And then when I moved here, like I said, I had a couple of friends, but, in general, it was just me. I spent a lot of time by myself in college. I spent a lot of time out of college by myself. And then I got married. So I wasn't totally by myself, but, indirectly, how that can go sometimes. People are going in different directions. But I've never really learned how to kind of approach new people in person. I've always been able to do it for business, but I think I can count less than 5 friends that I have, not including social media. But yeah, I don't have a lot of people that I know, and overall, it doesn't bother me. I have time periods just like, geez, I wish I had someone to play with. But but a lot of the times I don't mind going out to eat by myself with the tablet and watching a movie while I don't mind that. I don't mind going to the mall just to walk. I don't have to go shopping, whatever. But it'd be nice to have, different people where you can say, let's go to the movies. I basically have one movie friend. And I do have the one, Syracuse University basketball friend. Okay, I got that guy. But in general, it doesn't happen that way. I don't visit people. People aren't visiting me. And that's not because of the pandemic. That's pretty much how that is. I might have someone visit me once or twice a year, and it's the same way. So I think, you would open up a little bit more in that way, but I'm not sure if that's anything that I would have been comfortable with knowing how I grew up. But, that's just life.
It is. That's just life. Was Syracuse University your first choice?
It was, but I couldn't go. What a lot of people don't know is just how little people who are in the military earn. So I found out, I think, oh my goodness, around the time my dad passed away is when I found out that the most he ever made in 1 year was $15,000. Back then, Syracuse University was $24,000 a semester. So even though I was here, I'd always known about Syracuse. I'd always, thought maybe that's the place to go. We weren't affording anything like that. I'd won a scholarship letter, so I could have gone to some other places out of the area, but I didn't want to do that. And so, there was just no way. So I support Syracuse, but I went to Oswego State where it was $800 a semester. We can afford that.
We can afford that. Of course you could.
Isn't that amazing?
You said that you had another profession in mind, but you ended up in healthcare, basically.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
I started out after I graduated college. I started out working at a Kmart part-time, and then I got a job at a music store. Back then, you actually had true music stores. You sold, instruments and sheet music and whatever, and I worked there, and I enjoyed that, but I was only making $3.50 an hour because, minimum wage
that's
was
$3. For the millennials, that is $3.50. So they don't get it twisted.
Yeah, and that was a raise. So, and okay, I enjoyed being in the music store. I met some, big musicians. I met and played with Marshall Tucker, although they never knew it. But I met them, and I met some other, big musicians. But I was still living at home. I didn't have enough money. And so I applied at the job places. They help you find jobs, whatever. I went to one of those places. I took the test. I scored perfect on the math. I typed 50 words a minute at the time, where all they were looking for was 35. Next day, I get a call saying this hospital wants to see me. And I'd never been in a hospital except the day I was born. And on the military base, they call it a dispensary. So I'd never been in a hospital. But I went and I got the job, and I just started kind of doing the work. And I really didn't think I was going to be in healthcare. I was going to be a songwriter. I was writing songs, That's what I thought was going to be my job. I had said I was going to write all these songs. I'm writing lyrics and music. And when one day, I'm going to show up on the Johnny Carson show, tell your audience who Johnny Carson is.
Right? They don't know that either.
Yeah.
But okay.
Yeah, but I'm going to show up on the Johnny Carson show, and I'm going to try to be engaging, and someone's going to say, you ought to have your own talk show. And that's really how I thought things were going to go. But it didn't quite work out that way. So at a certain point, I said, okay, I need to have a career. I've been here a while. I know a lot of the different jobs. Let me just do this. And so I ended up with a career in healthcare. But it really wasn't my plan. It's just that I was there. And
do you think you'll ever revisit the whole idea of music, writing music, sending Beyonce or Jay-Z some lyrics to a song?
The thing is, I don't know anything about new music. I mean, if you asked me to name 5 musicians, from the last 5 years, I'd be lost. I know Taylor Swift. I know Bruno Mars. I've never heard a song by Adele, but I know the name. I think that's, Pharrell, but only because of the Despicable Me movies.
Yeah.
But that's all I knew. I don't know, because I sang at my last wedding. I did weddings for 14 years, in the church most of the time. And I gave that up because I started traveling so much. Even when I was still employed, I said, I can't keep this up. So I haven't sang since 1999. And then I didn't sing after that for 12 years. But I started writing other stuff. As you know, I write a lot of articles. I've been in magazines. I've written over 6,000 articles. I've written 2 books. And, I went that direction instead of the piano because I didn't have time to practice. And when I was writing music, basically I would go to work, come home, and then I'd spend 4 or 5 hours on the piano writing stuff. So.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, because I know that, you spent the last couple of years taking care of your mom before she, passed away. What advice would you give to those of us in the generation, because it's us and generation X behind us, who may end up becoming caregivers? What advice do you have to share?
One of the things I'm going to share is try to find out something about it before you put in that position. I mean, I didn't know anybody who had gone through this until my mother came here. And then I wrote something because, mom had done something, and I just wrote something and put it on Facebook. And all these people came out of the woodwork saying, yes, my mother had this, or my friend's mother, whatever. It's like, wait a minute, where y'all been? I hadn't seen any of that. And then there were a couple of groups on Facebook, and I joined a couple of those, and now you're seeing other people's stories. And I went to a conference where 3 of the speakers had books on it. And it just never occurred to me, which is why I started writing articles and doing videos talking about it, because, it's something that a lot of people really want to avoid. But there's that possibility that you just might end up being the caregiver, or you're the family member who maybe you have someone else doing it. But there's a lot out there. And it's one of those kind of things where, you get prepared for that. And on top of that, you start thinking, if I'm making enough money, for instance, if you're putting money away, one of those other things you might be able to do is put it into long-term care insurance, so that if something happens, you've got money to actually pay someone to come to your house to take care of you, rather than having to go to a nursing home. I don't think there's a single person anywhere in the world whose goal is, when I get old, I'm going to go to a nursing home. I don't think so. But in almost every other country, they have that covered by their insurance. We don't have that in America. So that's something to think about. We're scared of thinking about things like that. I didn't get a will until I was married for almost 10 years, because you didn't want to think about that kind of thing could happen. But it seemed to make sense at that time. Got to take care of the family or take care of other people. I should have something down. We run away from things like that. Matter of fact, the first couple of times I wrote about my mother on Facebook, one of my cousins wrote and said, "Why are you saying these things about your mother? It's embarrassing." I said, "Why is it embarrassing? This is mom. This is what the Mitch is all about." There's a lot of people who knew about it, but 2, some other people who don't, but they're starting to go through things. That's why you do that. We can't always run away from this thing that's going to happen.
Exactly.
Now, I do read a lot just to throw this in, I read a lot of science books, because I'm hoping it's going to turn out to be like an episode of Outer Limits, where this guy basically read so much that his mind kept him alive, and then it turned his body into something where he was going to live forever. I said, yes, that's
okay, that's work. Too deep for me. But
yeah, that's not going to happen anyway, but I certainly tried.
All right, and on that note, I do have one final question. What advice, words of wisdom do you have to share with my listeners, viewers?
Well, I've given a couple of things already, but the one thing I'm going to say, which is something that I really haven't done, because I should have started earlier, is find those things that will help make you happy and keep you comfortable. Because of how my business went, and because of how I was worried a lot about my mother, and then I had to go through a divorce, and then, mom passed away. I don't have a lot of tools to go to get a lot more comfort. Like I said, I spent more time by myself. I was stunned to find out how many people cared about me after my mother passed away, because I just thought no one was going to care. It never occurred to me that there would be anybody out there. And even though that was nice and it was very helpful, I appreciate that. Well, here I am now a couple months later, and I don't really have that full support system anymore. I needed it at that moment, but now, it would be nice to be able to have that, to be able to have certain music that I can go to and say, okay, that'll make me comfortable. to help me when I go to bed and not have my heart all of a sudden start beating hard, which happens every single night, and have the sleep doctor who I go to, the somnambulist, whatever, because I can't pronounce it right, tell me it's in your head and you need to find a way to calm down. It's just something to think about. We can't always be worried about everything else that's going on. I mean, we can, but it doesn't suit us one bit.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, on that note, I do want to say thank you so much, Mitch, for sharing your "If I Knew Then What I Know Now." And to those of you who will be tuning in, thank you so much. And remember this, stay empowered along your own journey. See ya.
Good news you can use for your life. If you want to get the info that'll help you throughout your life.